The road to becoming a writer, social media coordinator was an interesting one. I think it starts when I was a little kid, about kindergarten, and I first started learning to write. I started writing a neighborhood newspaper, and I wrote it on printer paper in Crayola markers, and I would deliver it around the block to whoever my parents thought was old enough or kind enough to appreciate that gesture. And occasionally I was a day late, and it was very embarrassing to me because I would have to hand it out in church instead of around the neighborhood, and everyone knew that I had missed my deadline. So I really got a kick out of that, but it fell by the wayside as I started making friends in the neighborhood and going to school, and I started reading instead of writing. The problem was that the more I read, the more I wanted to write, and it just felt like I never had an original idea. I felt like a very cultured 7 or 8-year-old because I had read all of the Little House on the Prairie books, which made me very fancy. But every time I started even just telling a story to my brother, I felt like it morphed into something that, oh, that's familiar, I've already read that story. And I started to get a little anxious about that kind of creative writing in school. And I don't think I noticed it until college. And then it becomes an issue because you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. And I knew I loved writing, but I started to get a little bitter. I would see my friends publishing chapter books or writing songs, and even if I didn't think they were particularly good, I was jealous of them because they had been brave and they'd put something out into the world that was just theirs. And I felt inadequate. I felt like I would never be able to create something like that of worth. So what I started doing instead is professional writing, writing for businesses, writing for blogs. I felt very comfortable and very confident there, and so confident that I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it, and I took a creative writing course. And the same feeling just came back in waves. I would stay up late at night trying to come up with a poem. I would lose sleep over these stories. I would try desperately not to be plagiarizing, while everyone else I just felt like was being themselves and had incredible, amazing ideas that they put out in very creative ways. It was about that time that I started feeling frustrated. I was nervous. Writing is one of those careers where it's not very lucrative unless you're good at it. And I was just worried that that wasn't me. And about that same time, I started diving into Christianity, and that changed everything for me. It was the first worldview that I had encountered where my worth didn't depend on the product that I put out. It was intrinsic, and it was given to me by God. And his story was the one I was supposed to write. And it didn't matter if it was uber original and took everyone by surprise. My name was in the book that was already on the shelf, and I just felt like that made the Bible worth reading, and that made my life worthwhile regardless. And I was finally able to just relax. And I think that's when I started going back to my childhood days and thinking, journalistic writing might be my thing. I don't have to be something that I feel like I'm not. So I started doing journalism beats again, and while I didn't get a writing job right out of school, I ended up in sales. And the thing that I loved about that was being able to characterize the people that I met out in the field and be able to tell their stories to my coworkers. And that transitioned perfectly into what I do for Campbell. I get to interview amazing people with amazing stories. And what's more, I get to ask them about their faith and how that, or the lack thereof, played into where they are today. Some of my favorite stories that I've written for Campbell have involved transitions in their faith journeys, or ways that they felt that God or the Spirit was pushing them into an area that they never expected. And I think that everyone, even non-Christians, has felt that I didn't know I would be here, and yet here I am. And that's hands down my favorite part of my job. Sometimes going back to the beginning is helpful in reaffirming that you're where you're supposed to be. And I don't always hit deadlines still, but I know now that God is calling me to lean on that entrepreneurial spirit that I had when I was a 5 or 6-year-old writing that newspaper, just to go out and tell people stories and do what I love.